Hello YouTube and welcome to my dungeon. This is my woodworking shop and it's a mess right now, so the shop tour will have to wait till later. I used to do woodworking videos on a different video hosting site and I had a lot of fun doing that, and I wanted to try it on YouTube. You'll notice that I have some older videos where there were kind of little fun little things that I did on the side, but I didn't really get into the YouTube community until very recently. So I'm going to be making woodworking projects on this channel, and I hope you enjoy. Today I'm going to be making the sides for a box. Because I'm not a partner or anything, I'm limited in my time allowances. So just making a simple box is going to be broken down into different segments into a series. And I'm going to be making a potpourri box. It's a box that has perforations in the side, normally a design to allow the aroma of potpourri or whatever to escape the box, and it's usually a coffee table piece. So let's get started. So what I have here today is a nondescript piece of wood. Any hobbyist woodworker, at least in my income bracket, they'll tell you that the hardest part of woodworking is getting the material, and I got lucky and I picked up a lot of material from a guy who used to work for a timber framing company. So I got some really large pieces, and this is a cutoff from one of those pieces that I was able to mill on the table saw. And the way you mill a larger piece on a table saw, if it's thin enough, is you raise the blade about yay tall, and then you run it through, and then you raise it again. You don't want to tear a lot out, but I'll save that process for a different video. So right now I have a nondescript piece of wood. The problem with a lot of the material that I was able to get, it was not marked. It did not tell what kind of wood it was. And if you're one of those people that know a piece of wood just straight off, then good for you. For me, especially in these lighter woods, there's a lot of confusion for me. The thing is since this came out of a large piece from a timber frame company, I want to say that it's probably a white pine, especially considering the weight. This is actually very light, but the pattern kind of makes me think of maple. So this piece I'm going to use to make a prototype of the box, so that I can kind of work out all the details, since, you know, it was free, and I have more expensive pieces of wood that I'd rather not waste on a screw-up. Now I can see here that I have about 5 inches, maybe a little less than 5 inches on this board, and I think that probably 4 inches is going to be perfectly fine. I could probably even go as low as 3 inches on this board, but I'm going to stick with 4 and try out that dimension. Many table saws come with a measuring device so that you can gauge the distance between the fence and the blade built in. And you should never trust these straight out of the box, because they can be off. You will have to adjust this when you buy a table saw, or if you've bought a table saw. The thing is since I've moved from my old shop, I have not bothered to adjust this again, because I disassembled the whole thing so that it could be moved safely. Now my table saw blade is an 1/8 inch wide, so what I'm going to do is set my square here to 4 1/8 inch here, so that I can get a good register on the actual blade, and I can adjust my table saw to that measurement. Now I've actually gone about a 32nd of an inch over 4 1/8, and that's because I want to have room to plane down that edge when I'm finished. Whenever setting up your table saw to make a cut, only go about a tooth above the thickness of the wood that you're using. And on a piece this short that I'm going to be able to have a lot of control over, I could probably even go shorter than that. And if you're high above the blade, if you think about it like this, if you catch your finger in the blade with the blade this high above the thickness of the wood that you're using, think about how many fingers you're going to lose. Yet you might end up with a really nasty laceration with only this much showing. It's not going to be pretty, but it's not going to be near the amount of damage that you would have with the blade this high.
Now this should go without saying, but the table saw blade is the most dangerous part of the table saw, and you have to be aware of where that is and where your fingers are in relation to it. Always keep a good distance, and when you can, use a push stick like I have here. You can buy them pre-made, or you can make one out of a scrap piece of plywood like I have.
Now what I just did, I'd love to tell you that I did it on purpose for demonstration purposes, but the truth is I just goofed up. Whenever I hit this with my knee, which is how I usually turn off the table saw in order to have my control of my hands and know where everything is, whenever I cut it off, I did not wait for the blade to stop turning before I reached over it. And by the time I realized what I had done, I'd already done it. So that is one thing to think about, is to always be careful in your shop, because these things hurt. There was one point in time when I ran my middle finger on my right hand through a router table. And let me tell you, those kind of injuries, they can really put you out for a while. Now, in the woodworking community, there is this kind of friendly debate over which is better, hand tools or power tools. And I see benefits in both. Power tools get you the dimensions that you want pretty fast, but hand tools are extremely satisfying when it comes to actually working the wood. It allows you to enjoy the process a little bit more, in my opinion. So I tend to be a little more of an in-between guy. I don't have a workbench right now, so I don't get to use my hand tools very often. But the dimensions of this particular piece of stock allows me to clamp it to my fence here on my table saw and make a few passes just to smooth out the tool marks in this edge of the board. Now, looking at the grain in this piece of wood, it tends to be fairly regular, so I'm probably just going to pick a direction and see how that goes and see if I have any tear out. And I actually ended up having a lot of tear out on this end, so I'm going to give it a go from the other side. Now this seems to be much, much better, but I had some pretty vicious tear out over there, so it's going to take more than a few passes to get that out. Yeah, that was some pretty nasty tear out. Now I'm dealing with a piece of stock that is 29 inches long, and that really allows me to have a lot of waste, or to account for 2 inches of waste and have a nice easily divisible number such as 27. And that means I get to go ahead and cut 2 9-inch pieces out of this piece of stock, and I'm not worried about too much about the waste because I still have plenty of left on the end. Now, I'm not really concerned about, or I don't really want to put pencil marks on the stock. I will be sanding it later, but I don't want to also have to worry about sanding out those pencil marks, especially in softwood where a pencil can gouge in. So I'm just going to use my table saw to dimension this. So I've got my block here, and you'll see how that's useful in a minute. I have my block, and I'm going to set my table saw blade to 9 1/8 inch away from the block. So now that I have my fence adjusted to exactly where I want it, I can take this block and move it back. And I'm going to clamp this block into place just like so, and this is going to be what I register the piece of stock off of before I run it through the blade. You don't want the piece of stock to have no room to go, because if it happens to turn sideways as it's getting pushed through, then it's going to kick back and you'll have wood flying everywhere.
A quick trim to square up the edge. and then I'll register against the block and notice the space on the left side of your screen. And the second piece, and then I'll readjust to 4.5 inches so that my sides will be half as long as the length of the box. And we'll cut that off, and then we have a problem.
Now this, on the last piece, since I'm using pretty much all of the board, you have to really think about what you're doing. Because if I set this to my stop here and run it through, you'll see that I don't have a lot of registration on the fence and the board here, and it's a little flippy, but also my fingers are really close to the blade, and that's not something I'm willing to deal with. So what I'm going to do is, or I've already done, is I've already readjusted the blade to be a tooth height above double thickness. And that way I can take my two pieces and line them up by feel, and always trust your fingers over your eyes whenever you're trying to line up two pieces of wood perfectly. Readjust just a little. And if you can feel a difference, then there's a difference that you might not necessarily see. And right here, this part of my fence is actually where my blade cuts. And I'm setting this piece that I've already cut to make a skimming pass on the blade. So I am going to take just a little bit off, maybe about a 1/16, but this side piece and the bottom side piece, both of those are going to be exactly the same. Now, as you can see, I already have the four sides of my box worked out pretty much. Now, I'm going to lose about 2 centimeters because of the finger joints I'm going to be doing in the sides. So they're going to go together like my fingers are right now. So I am going to lose a little bit, but it's still going to be a decent sized potpourri box. Now, before I do the finger joints, and also the next in the next part of this series, I'm going to be using the scroll saw to cut perforations in the front and the back for the aroma of the potpourri to escape. And I'm looking for something Asian inspired. I haven't settled on anything yet, but it's going to be something Asian inspired because the lid and the handle for the lid are both Asian inspired, and I may go with some Asian inspired legs as well. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.